Hey, Leah, what are we unwrapping today?
We are unwrapping Robocop.
Crinkle, crinkle,
Did I remember my lines?
crinkle,
I
crinkle.
imp-
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And Paul Verhoeven's 1987, Peter Weller starring RoboCop. A personal favorite of mine. Not necessarily in my top 10, but it is something that I absolutely love with all my heart. And for a variety of different reasons and a variety of different ways. It is a just an absolutely brutal movie. And Leah, initial take.
Yeah, it is brutal. Yeah, so the violence started, and I remember just thinking, no, thank you. Look, I think I may have even said that out loud to myself. No, thank you. And then I was like, all right, I'm prepared. Um, yeah, there's some interesting themes in the movie, but ultimately it ended and I think I rolled my eyes. I mean, the ending is like kind of annoying. Like just the
Oh,
way very
I
80s and kind of
love
like, all
I
right.
love that ending. I
I mean,
I
it's,
absolutely
sticky and
love it. I
cute, but
I love it because all right, we can start right with the ending. Well, I mean
sure.
there's two endings, right? There's the scene right in the abandoned like factory toxic waste, right? Clarence Boniger's
Sure.
death, right? I love all that. Absolutely love all that. Love the look. I mean I find it very cathartic in so many ways. But then like the scene is ridiculous. After that, the whole movie's ridiculous. And I believe it's ridiculous on purpose, right? And and then it gets the final scene is ridiculous. And I believe on purpose also, right? You have a boardroom, you have Ronnie Cox, just a fantastic performance. He's giving a great boardroom speech, right? He's impressed with himself, right? We're going, innovation into the future. We're gonna this, and this, right? Your typical corporate boardroom speech. Unfortunately, right? We're beyond familiar with it at this point, right? And then the moment he's exposed, he acts like just any other like criminal, like comically any other criminal. I want a chopper, right? I want right? He takes the gun, right? I want this, I want that, right? Um, and it's hysterical. And I think it makes him so pathetic. And I these days I can even more so enjoy someone with at the height of status and power, the moment they are unequivocally exposed for being nothing more, right, than um a criminal, right? Just a base, right, criminal, take what you can despite the cost, and immediately reverting to get me a chopper, right? I'm out of here, right? That kind of.
Hmm.
And then when I buy I mean the old man, nice shooting, son. Tiny just die. And he says, "What's your name?" Right? First of all, you get the close up, right, of the twirling and the gun going in the hip, right? Obviously, right, very Western, no surprises there. But then the look on Weller's face when he turns and he goes, Murphy. Just, like it's so hysterical, right? That where he's, he might as well just say identity, right? And he gets a little like he winks almost at us and immediately goes to Robocop. What more do you need?
Yeah, tell me about the stickiness of it.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, the film isn't subtle. I mean, those themes are there and they're very like out there. It's like this is what we're saying. Some of it felt relevant. Like I guess there was like an AI aspect, that I was getting. It was sort of like the robot he created in the beginning was very much like AI. It was like there's no humanity to that and it's malfunctioning and it's ending up being a menace. And then there's the version that's like sort of based in humanity, which is RoboCop. So it's like because he's sort of human, he can still be moral, or there's like an aspect where he can catch himself or do the right thing, where the other machine can't. So I felt like that was felt a little bit timely to me. And like maybe that was something I got out of it. I don't know. I'm still trying to like process it and be like, okay, what is the movie really saying? Obviously, it's like fuck the man and the corporation and all that stuff, which always works. But outside of that, yeah, it's just shticky shtick. Like it's just all the I'll
Can
it's
you define
very
shtick, sticky, shtick?
Do you,
it
do you mean
is
schlock?
No, I mean maybe I do. I don't know. It just feels like corny, essentially. Like it's not, like I said, it's not subtle, so it feels like very, it's like pushing it in your face, kind of ridiculous, like a little dated, and like the acting is like the other police officer was just like, okay.
Oh
Yeah, it's
wow,
not
going after Nancy Allen.
whoever she was. Yeah, I didn't love her. I
She's a
liked the
big,
criminals. They worked for me. I mean,
yeah.
they were all good actors, and I definitely recognize some of them.
You've definitely seen Nancy Allen before. She was Brian De
Okay.
Palma's partner for a number of years, so she's in a lot of De Palma films.
Oh, really?
She's
Okay.
in, yep, she's in
Interesting.
Blowout. She's in Dress to Kill.
I
Um,
haven't seen those.
she's in Carrie, the
Oh,
primary antagonist in Carrie. So yeah, those are
okay.
those are just a couple Nancy Allen pieces.
Okay. Well, I didn't
I'm glad you like
like
the
very
villains
much.
though. I mean, they were,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I did laugh like that scene where he, gets his whole entire body shot off. I mean, like they were funny in that scene. Like it's so ridiculous and yeah, even like the first guy who's like peeing and I mean it's just I don't know. Yeah, it's all like it reminded me a little bit of like a Schwarzenegger movie with like the one-liners. There were a lot of those. So those aren't my favorites. So I sort of laughed at those. Yeah, I guess it's hard for me to take a movie like this that seriously just because of the tone of it. It just feels kind of like I like they're trying, it's so silly. Like they're trying to be silly and funny that it loses me a bit. But I can take away certain themes.
It's so interesting what the two of you guys are saying because I think you guys are capturing the feedback of the film, like the overall critical response, but like Leah
Okay.
almost in like subversive might not be the right word, but so like where when I was watching the movie, I was thinking it's like the thin line between principle and propaganda, where you have this like commentary on police and like the Big Brother or whatever the court like the corporatizing the military and the police and all of that and so like Michael looking at it from that probably the message the filmmaker's trying to make, but like Leah really took away what I think was the overall audience response, which was, oh, this is just another. In 1987, right? We see like the reaction to this movie with people like, yeah, RoboCop's a badass. Like nobody, I think Vera Homan like really leaned in or was like trying to make a commentary, and a lot of people just bought the Happy Meal.
No, they were actively trying to make it, right. Like the writer, who later on Edward, I'm gonna say his name wrong, like Neiman, he was actively making a film, right, that was a critique, right, of Reagan's America, right, and later on he and Verhoeven would go on to make Starship Troopers, which was right, the heroes are fascists, right, like they did everything they can in Starship Troopers to make the heroes fascists, and they were not supposed to be, right, they're heroes in quotes, right, so. Look, one of my favorite books, which I teach probably every other year, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right? And I think now people are like cynical when they go, oh, like people joke, right? Oh, Victor Frankenstein's actually the monster, right? And I can't stand that for a variety of reasons. It bothers me for a variety of reasons because what do you mean by that? Victor Frankenstein's a self-righteous, selfish, entitled man, and let's analyze that. Then let's say that because he is. But I'm more invested in this. Like at what point is someone's humanity taken away? And on top of that, right, like with this one in particular, there's that scene in the bathroom between Miguel Ferrer, who I love that actor again, right, and Dick Jones, also fantastic name for like just a corporate,
For the villain.
a-hole. And and he goes, "You better pray," right? He says after he pulls his hair, "You better pray that an unholy monster of yours does not screw up." And this idea of taking everything from someone, creating, right, infusing that then person with all of this power, believing you are in control of that power, and then something surprises you. It's oftentimes in this is a fiction, but oftentimes in our reality, that is often the undoing, right, of a power structure. The belief in complete absolute control, sharing some of that power, and then that power in the hands of someone believed to be completely locked in or in control can undo. Mixed with the Frankenstein narrative, the creation, the monster narrative. And I mean, and I think that what makes the film work, at least for someone like me, is the I feel all of it. Like that scene in the middle of the film where he's in the chair and he has a dream, right? Like I'm watching it and my heart's racing, right? I'm feeling it too. Like I'm all in on the emotion of it all. And the idea that right here you have this individual, right, who has everything taken, experienced unimaginable trauma, and instead of processing it, right? I mean, this only works in fiction. Instead of processing it, it's going to go out and kill some bad guys, or excuse me, go out and arrest. And I don't even want to use the phrase bad guys. Go out and arrest predators who are hurting other people or trying to hurt other people, right?
Okay, can I
That is,
interject? Oh wait,
yes.
no, finish your. Well, just because you brought up Frankenstein, I'm just thinking about Frankenstein versus this, which I don't. I feel like there's a difference because I mean, I read Frankenstein and I love that book so much. And I think it's like a really tragic story because it's like creating somebody or something that then is like has pain that does things that isn't, it's not their fault. It's like they're responding to the world that they're in and they sort of are a little bit out of control. And so I feel like that's a commentary on something where this is like, I don't feel, well, like I don't feel this is like a tragic story. Like the RoboCop is not doing anything bad. Like, in Frankenstein, he like kills that little girl or whatever. It's like he sort of
Right.
does
He
things
kills
that are
it's the little
really,
well, he saves the little
wasn't
girl.
it?
Sorry, I read it so much.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
So what happens is, right, you get Victor's story first, then you get the creation story. And essentially, right, the creation is abandoned. He's treated brutally, like just brutally, and all he does is try to be kind over and over and over and over again, right? And then the
Right.
last straw is when he saves a little girl, and the father's gratitude is to shoot him and have a bullet like
Right.
pierce
That's
his
what it was.
bone.
Okay.
And then he's like, and then at that point, I mean, I'm really paraphrasing the book, but at that point, after doing all he can to hide in the shadows and serve humanity, right? He's like, all right, forget it. I'm not going to. But before I kill myself, before I die, before I go off into the wilderness, let me find my creator and just ask why, right? And then he meets Victor's younger brother, the youngest of children, this like cherub child, right, who's playing a game, and the little boy, and he goes to like ask a question, and the little boy is like, "Get away from you, monster! My father, I forget the father's name, whatever, Frankenstein will get you." And like in a rage, he snaps the kid's neck, right? And at that moment, he's like, "Okay, I think I'll be a monster." He frames this other person. He goes
Right.
down this road, right, where he frames someone like that everything he does at that point, so that murder is a moment of blinding rage. And
hmm
it's not he doesn't then choose, what have I done, let me go to Victor Frankenstein and plead, ask forgiveness, let us both have some kind of moment of reconciliation. No, he's like, what would happen if I frame an innocent person for this? How would that
hmm
feel? He's embracing. He's like, if you want a monster, I'll give you a monster, right? I will
Right.
be the thing you thought I was, and I could have been so much more,
hmm
right?
Yes.
And even then, when he does that, he still works to say, "Hey, look how bad I can be, but Victor, kind of make me a partner, and I'll go off and just won't be so lonely, and then you'll be fine." And then Victor basically is like, "No, you're still an unholy monster," right? Refuses to like really listen to him,
hmm
and then more murder ensues, and
Yeah.
it goes on from there. Right. So I
Right.
and I, I agree with you, Leah, right? Your initial point, right? That this is not that. This is not that. The parallels, just that there are so many of the monster stories of what is considered something with great power. Because the he also, Dick Jones, is afraid of it, right? Rightfully so, because he can't control it, right? Anything he can't control, he's afraid of. And this is something new. He can't control it, right? He believes he can, but he's still aware of it, still afraid of it, right? He puts Directive 4 in there, right? So he can't shoot him, an employee of OCP, right? But there's still this, he does not like. what this new thing that has been created.
I guess I have a hard time believing that because was he the one that created that other monster or was it the other?
The Ed
That was
209,
him,
yeah,
right?
but that
Yeah.
was a complete robot, right? That was right, like that's a
Right. So
robot.
why
He didn't create that. The other person created it. I forget who the character is.
No, Dick Jones, the Ed 209.
that initial one that then like
Yeah,
kills that
Dick Jones
colleague that no
creates
one
that.
seems to
Miguel
care about?
Ferrer, Bob
Right.
Morton creates Robocop.
Right. Okay.
Right. So right. So I guess I have a hard time believing like it's sort of just vengeance. It's like, well, you created a robot that's better than mine and I didn't get the credit for the one I did or it malfunctioned or he didn't care. Ultimately, he is immoral and he said like I didn't even care if it worked. I just wanted to sell it to the military or whatever.
Right.
So, he is just trying to get back at somebody. But I don't know that I really felt like he was really afraid of it. I mean, I guess he was because he knew that it was capable of potentially overtaking him. But I don't know. I just didn't buy that yeah, it didn't really work for me, that aspect of it. Because he wanted one too. Like he had created a robot. Um, which I guess I thought was an interesting concept. I mean, initially when that scene opens, when that R2, whatever, I know R2D2 is not
And
that, but whatever
Ed
they called
209, right?
it. Okay.
Our
Whatever
R2D2 is a little scamp. I mean, he's our best
I
friend.
still have not seen Star Wars,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we haven't gotten to that
Future
episode yet.
episodes. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I thought like, okay, this concept of a robot to replace a cop is interesting. So if cops are getting hurt, the idea of like replacing man with machine so that man doesn't have to get hurt. Like in military, I was almost thinking like, oh, are we like this concept of like, what if we're just fighting that like machines are fighting each other instead of people fighting each other, and then we can, not risk like, the livelihood of people. But then that just doesn't work in the long term. But anyway, so that idea was like, okay, is this what this is supposed to be doing? But then he like massacres this man. I don't know. I was trying to figure out like what is the movie trying to say with this idea? Like why did this guy come up with this idea to begin with? And then what would this have done had it worked? And then just a second point about that scene was that like why didn't anybody care that their colleague had just gotten murdered in front of them? Like no one seemed to respond to this. I was like, damn, like the 80s people were really brutal. Like I don't know. I don't think that we could have made a movie now where people just didn't respond. They're just like, "Oh, let's get back to our work day." Like so yeah, those are my thoughts on that initial scene. I'm curious what your response would be.
I think right, definitely this movie would definitely not be made now, right? At least not as a major studio Hollywood film, right? Maybe it gets made with a much lower budget on the fringes. Maybe a smaller studio makes it. Maybe it's like an A24 kind of a film, or a Focus or some kind of like subdivision. But it does speak to when that guy dies, right? You have people crying, but then right there, but the money makers, right? The people, right? You have people in the room crying, right? You have the old man being like, Dick, I'm very disappointed, right? Because they're thinking about profits, right? And
Hmm.
your question of well, what would happen if it was successful? A fascist state would happen, right? Like essentially, right? They want to erase Detroit, right? They want to completely gentrify, right? They want to erase Detroit. They want to build new Detroit over old Detroit, right? And they figure they'll use these robots, right, to police it, right, and create a fascist state.
Okay, maybe I just missed the setup because I was a little bit like, okay, what? Like it took me a minute to grasp like the setup of the movie, I think. So I was like, oh, is it like because these police officers just died and that's why they're doing this? It's like to protect police officers from criminals.
They're
Or is it obviously
profiting.
they're creating this new city? But yeah, okay.
So the movie is definitely a commentary on. I'm spacing all I have of these buzzwords in my head right now, um, to get us on track of capitalism, violence, like these, because the whole movie, like, so throughout the movie, we see like a bunch of these commercials, right? And we see a lot of these like taglines, like "I'd buy that for $1," and it's this like the a state of where we are in the world, where that's like void of compassion and is just more fixated on um like objectification. So it's like a dehumanizing the world, and it equates to profit and consumerism. So like where there's the focus on like on selling over community well-being. And I think the commentary gets lost in the movie somewhere because we kind of walk away from it thinking that what the comment is about consumerism being bad, we walk away being like that was awesome. And I think somewhere along the line, like there's like what is it about the violence that captivates us, the
Yeah,
viewer?
I'm glad you brought that up because I really loved that part of the film where it was showing those commercials like interspersed with the news. Like this is happening in real life. And then here's a game where we're doing this and everyone's like having fun and it's made light of. And, just like sort of a commentary on how the news can go from one thing to another to another. And then there's the commercials and we're all just benefiting. And I feel like that was really strong in the film. Yeah. And I think it does kind of get lost. Because then it's like this other story. I don't know if the two things connect fully for me in the movie.
Right. It becomes a revenge film, right? It becomes a revenge
Hmm.
fantasy, right? But
Right.
when he goes after, he does not go after, I mean, to be clear, right? He doesn't go after Clarence Bonniger and that crew for any reason other than they took his life from him, right?
Right.
They took his life from him and he's going to enact his revenge. At first, what he does, right, is that he arrests, right? He arrests Bonniger because he's a cop and that's his identity, and that was his former identity, right? So he goes in, but he targets them, right? Because they took his life from him, right? It's by happenstance, right? That it happens, right? But he's triggered and he's raw and he goes after them, right? The first half of the film is this question of, right, the corporation always wins because they profit if a city is being overrun with crime and the citizens are being victimized, they can come into a vulnerable situation and take advantage. They are coming in, they are taking advantage, they are profiting off of it. And it's a no lose situation for them. It's not like they're coming in and saying, hey, you know what the police really need, what we need are stronger schools, right? We need better schools, we need better supplies, we need better institutions. The police need more support, better resources, right? As does the fire department. Families need additional resources, right? Infrastructure, none of that, right? They're coming in and they're saying, we would really love this place could be wonderful for us. We got to get all these working class people out of here, right? And the police, right? Those are blue collar jobs as well, right? Like all of them, right?
Hmm.
Whether it's a construction worker, right? Whether it is, right, people living on the street, whether it's a person who's victimized by addiction, we need to clear all these people out of here and make it look shiny and make it look new. Which is again what I love about their creation, right? They create what they believe, right? Robocop, right, is a he is as shiny and new as a person can be, right? The Ed 209 is dirty and it's a robot, right? And it's kind of and it's janky. And there's something about what they create in him that get what I like is how it gets turned on its head. Also, I don't mind that becomes a revenge fantasy because the revenge fantasy, right, speaks to the unpredictability of autonomy. Patrick, I have more to say about Patrick.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I think the movie is a commentary on capitalism and how a necessary function of capitalism is individuals, the community at large being oppressed, right? And then if we were like examining that deeper and further, capitalism, I think the movie is arguing this, and is capitalism is a form of violence, and that at a certain point, the morality, because like while I'm like watching the movie, when you see Murphy get killed, it is horrible to watch. I've seen the movie a handful of times, maybe like four times throughout my life, and his execution's brutal to watch. The dream sequences are deeply, I find them deeply emotional, and his storyline is a storyline of humanity. And then that last scene that goes away, and what is left is like his use of violence, and that use of violence feeds the corporations that create them. And then so the moral message is ultimately capitalism always wins.
Well, I mean, in that last scene, right, I mean, everybody's embracing the violence, right? You have Bob Morton's friend, right, like standing up as Dick Jones is being shot an insane amount of times, right, and about to go out the window. You cut to the friend standing up, like, yeah, get him, right? Like blood is spurting everywhere, right? He's like he's salivating at the mouth practically, right? There is an embrace of violence serving also, right, the corporation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we see like for the first time, in actuality, Murphy's humanity goes away, but then after the killing, his personhood gets recognized.
I mean, all this sounds good. I'm liking what I'm hearing, but I didn't feel it when I was watching it. I
Well,
don't
that's
know.
what
It
kills me
just,
about
yeah.
it. That's what kills me about it because the ultimately the movie was really successful in selling lunchboxes, which is wild. It's the same thing as like Rambo. I mean, it was.
No,
That's
I don't. The movie wasn't successful in selling lunchboxes. The lunchboxes came later, right? They did, right? It was. I know what you mean by Patrick when you're saying like the same thing with Rambo, like RoboCop, right. They turn RoboCop into right. They make a second film, right? The movie's popular, right?
right.
And it's an idea that people enjoy. There is a simple narrative that is not what the film is that people take and run with. Similar to Rambo. Rambo 2 becomes that thing. RoboCop 2 does not, but there's a Rambo cartoon show.
There's a
There's
RoboCop 2.
And a
Oh,
three, and an animated
Oh,
there are three
series,
no.
RoboCop
Okay.
films, and there is a RoboCop and there is
animated
a
series.
RoboCop remake as well, where Michael
Okay, sure.
Keaton plays the bad guy. But in the 80s,
Interesting.
right, there's a cartoon show, right? There's a RoboCop cartoon show. There are criminals that he goes after, right? They turn, right? It becomes right something else.
Well, did it
That is
become like a
correct.
vigilante thing? Is that the idea? Or he's
No,
still
but
like
you
a
know,
cop
he's a cop who
technically?
goes
He's still
after
working
the
for.
cartoon
Yeah,
show, right? Which I've never seen, but I've seen
Okay.
the toys, right? He's a cop working. And the second film is gross. And it's upsetting too because Irvin Kershner directs it. And if you're familiar at all, you're not familiar at all with Irvin Kershner, Leah,
No.
but essentially, right, he directs The Empire Strikes Back, which is considered an amazing film. Star Wars was breathtaking and wonderful, and then Empire, like kind of like puts it up a notch. And
Mhm.
his story is fascinating because he was a TV director and a film director who Lucas had at USC as his professor, who Lucas always thought, and this is what makes Lucas so fascinating. There are so many stories early in Lucas's career just like this, where Lucas thought this guy never got a shot this guy never got the recognition he deserved. So he just asked Kirshner to make Empire Strikes Back, right? Like you talk about all the people who would have killed to make that film, and he just like, hey, you want to make this film? And that's the only one Lucas kind of leaves alone, right? He has a lot of
Interesting.
hands in on the third one, and then what happens later. So Kirshner then makes RoboCop 2 years later, and it is a horrible film. Frank Miller wrote the screenplay. It's really this movie's violent, and there's a grime to it, but it is trying. Whether some of us say yes, it works, others say maybe it works, or we all recognize it as trying to do something with the violence. And RoboCop 2 is just grimy and ugly and like almost like vomit inducing
Well,
in the griminess.
I would argue, I mean, you said they're doing something with the violence. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is the film is actively a commentary, right? Like where like Patrick's saying that, when he watches Murphy get shot, it's emotional for him, right? When like what are they doing with the violence? When he takes this, I know we're jumping all over the place. When, Clarence Bonniger, Kurtwood Smith takes the piece of metal and he goes, Sayonara, Robocop. Great line, by the way. And it pierces him, right? And I don't even know
Mhm.
why he's screaming. I didn't know he could feel pain, but apparently in that moment he's screaming, right? And Randy's squeezing it in, and you see Murphy, right? Use his key, right? You see the look on his face of absolute satisfaction and joy as he shoves it into Vonneguer's neck. And when he pulls it out, you hear a and all the blood
Ugh.
spurting all over him,
Yeah.
right? And it
For,
is
for for
it is
those
right. It
listening,
is
Leah's making
insanely
a
violent,
face
right?
of
Leah's shaking
disgust.
her head. Leah's shaking her head like that is so gross. I can't stand it. And I am standing up, pumping my fist, right? Every time, like, yes, get that fucker, because he is nothing, right? But just like pure unadulterated evil.
But it's the same in the beginning when they massacre
Yeah,
Murphy and the guy, the D Ed, whatever his name is, that kills that guy in the office. Like it's so gory and violent. Like it's so over the top. So what's the
right.
difference between that? Like these are characters that didn't do anything, and then it's like so how can you then enjoy when the bad guy gets it? I don't know. I
That's
just
the
have a hard
struggle
time
for
with
me,
it.
which I
That's why
think
you
is the
can't enjoy it.
commentary. But yeah, but that goes back to the where I think honestly I feel like I'm going to say his name wrong. Verhoeven
Yeah, Verhoeven, Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, no, I think that that's where Verhoeven maybe fails, and that's like I feel like Verhoeven unfairly gets criticized with his attempts. Like I feel like he does a lot of things that almost David Lynch does and gets away with, like his use of like va violence. David Lynch does things, and people are like, "Oh, I understand what he's doing," but for some reason, when Verhoeven does it, people are like, "Oh," and I think it's like in the way that it follows like a narrative where Lynch
But I
doesn't,
don't
so it
remember
leaves a
David Lynch doing stuff like that. Like his violence is more like absurd and creepy. Like this is just all out like ridiculous. Like no one even bleeds like that. I mean, maybe they do, like in war when they get blown up or something. But this just seems like, is it really necessary for them to have done that? And they're having so much fun, and then we're supposed to. I bet in the theater people were laughing at that. Inappropriate, you know what I mean? And that pisses me off. Like I don't want that to even be available for people to enjoy.
But that's where I go back to the same thing. Like with Lynch, like you would also say it's absurd and ridiculous. Oh, you would say that with Verhoeven, it's absurd and ridiculous. It's just done in a different way. Like I have the same for me if I'm watching it Home Alone. I have like the same visceral reaction. Like there's certain Lynch movies like I can't watch or scenes I can't watch and I can appreciate. And same thing with Verhoeven where I'm watching this and I'm going like I don't want to see this. I don't want to experience this. And why am I and there I think there is I hope that there's like a disdain for the violence as well. Like in the same that's the message and hopefully waking people up because I think from what just a little bit of the research I was doing before we were recording. Um, I think, and this reflects back to my childhood awareness of the movie, where I mean, it came out in '87, so I don't think I was really aware of it. I think I was aware of it, but not aware of it until maybe I was like 7 or 8. Not that I saw the movie.
I mean, I
Um,
used to watch it. You had to be because I used to watch it. I recorded it on television, so I had
right,
most of the gnarly parts cut out. I
right,
would watch it somewhat often. I recorded on a little recorder the score at the end of the film because I was so captivated
Wow.
by it.
yeah,
So you had to have heard that playing in the house.
yeah. I mean, how old were you then? I mean, that was. I remember watching it at like Michael Martinez's house, watching like parts of it, and then being like, "What are you doing watching that?" Like some adult was like, "You're not you."
Fourth
Like,
grade, fifth grade for me,
yeah,
right? Like, yeah.
so that my memory's right. Like so, like 6, 7 years old, I'm aware of this movie. I've at least seen some scenes. Like I remember the attempted rape scene from like being in like Michael Martinez's house. So sorry, I'm name checking people. I don't know, but
No,
like
well,
so I
that's a
must
perfect
be.
scene. Like, I think that's a perfect scene to kind of talk about when you finish, and
But
then we'll.
my point in like in some of the research reflects some of my memory on it, which is that kids were very fascinated with this movie, and it
Hmm.
was speaking to something I think that was like going on in the '80s in this like overall kind of detached from humanity consumerism world that also kind of reflects some of our reality over the last 10 years today. But so there is something about it that I think I don't know. I'm trying to examine. There was okay, so the violence of it, I think kids or viewers were pulled away from early on throughout the film, but I think like what Michael's saying, I think captures the audience response. When you see it in the beginning, you're horrified. Then when you see the bad guys get it at the end, you're cheering. And that I think is a message. I personally think I think that's the message, but I think it's a dangerous message. And I
Well,
don't know
what
if
is the
it's
message? Like, what
It,
is
it, it
that
is
a
it
message
is a
about?
dangerous message. Like, so a couple things. Like, one, it's dangerous message. I agree. Two, in fiction, right? In fiction, I am 100% okay with that message. People then believe, right? Like, I can take the things that I take out of this film into reality is that predators exist. This film does a fantastic job of showing depravity and how certain people think and act. That is real. Though in reality, we can't just, right, go through them, right, like paper, like Alex Murphy does in many ways, right? Um, like we don't get to do that. So the film then in that way becomes cathartic, especially if you are someone who sees and or experiences that kind of violence. If for some people, right, they experience it in a way that it's very personal and they don't want to have a relive it and then have a catharsis at the end. They don't want that. They just can't stomach it. Right. Other people, they experience it that same way and they can, or they experience it abstractly and they want the fantasy. I'm not really big on revenge fantasies where it's only about like the person getting their revenge. what I think this film does a little bit differently is for him, it is personal, but these guys are like the film makes it very clear that they are, what is it like? Oh, these there's that what there's this horrible line. It just came to my head. A horrible line from a bad Stallone movie, "Crime is the Cancer and I'm the Cure," called Cobra, where these guys literally are. They represent the primary right antagonist for this whole city outside of the corporation. Right, they do the corporation's dirty work. And by him, it's not. So for him, it's personal, but for the city at large and or the viewer, with them out of the game, so to speak, right? There is this idea that there will be less victims. And this isn't like Batman, right? Where they're just arrested, right? And then Batman is reconciling, right? How to continue to maintain peace while also not killing or being as brutal as those who he goes after. None of that, right? It is brutal, right? This takes place in the future where the world is brutal, or at least the world of the city is brutal, right? Because he goes out to the suburbs and it's not brutal, right? There's like a
Mhm.
respite from that. You have to go into the city, right, to get to experience the brutality, right? Or at least that specific kind of brutality.
So is the idea that the violence is justified because it's like there are predators and they have to be dealt with accordingly? Like we can't just arrest them. That's not going to stop it. And so we should feel good because,
I
that's
think
just what needs to happen.
I think there's tension, and maybe tension's not the right word, between filmmaker and an author, right? I think what the film that the author was making is the film that Patrick is speaking to, right? Where at the end you really are supposed to leave, right, with a sick feeling about the future of capitalism and how dangerous and how scary it is, particularly when those who are pure capitalists, it is an ugly business, right? And profit supersedes everything. And then I think with Verhoeven, here he gets the screenplay to make this film. Also, they're making a Hollywood studio film, right? I mean, they're making a big budget movie where the bad guys die, the good guy wins, right? So they're doing that too, right? So Verhoeven gets this, and he wants to play with the kind of themes that he plays with, that he's made in Dutch cinema. He was his film right before this, a film about the Crusades, I think, with Rucker Hauer, right? I mean, Verhoeven makes violent films, right? The next film after this is Total Recall. So he makes right, he makes violent films,
Yeah, I knew
and
we had just talked about him, and then when I looked him up after this, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's why." Because I had just seen Total Recall. So yeah, these are like two peas in a pod.
yep,
Yeah, it's so funny. Leah's like, why did he send me RoboCop? And it's
No,
like,
I
oh,
know
because I
why. I
mentioned
mean,
Total Recall.
oh, is that what? Right, that's
I think
why.
I was,
Okay,
no,
you're
no,
like,
that's
he
oh
not
was
that
wait,
he
is
was
definitely
hungry
not why.
for it. He
yeah,
really wanted to send, but I think there was the
yeah.
moment and that
No, I think I know why you sent it to me because I think like for you, and I'm gonna speak for you, but you can correct me, please. Like themes sort of like when the theme is there, it might like surpass some other things. Or it's like when the themes are heavy, like they can work for you in a way that maybe it can't work for me. Like I need a theme. Like I need there to be a message in a certain way. I mean, sometimes it's too heavy and it doesn't work, but I can appreciate like what's behind the film. And I think I understand why you love the film, but it just doesn't like the other stuff, the thematic, like, the theme versus the thematic, like the thematic elements of the film, the way the film is made, the tone of it, I should say, is I think what's throwing me a little bit with this
This
one.
is what I love. This is what I love about what we're doing here. Because Leah just said, if it's too heavy, I don't think it works. And Leah's favorite film is Mike Lee's Naked, which is hit you
Okay.
over the head.
All right, I'm putting my hair back for this one. I'm
I don't
gonna,
so.
disagree with you,
we're
Leah.
getting into
First of
it.
all,
Okay.
I don't. All I'm saying is right
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not comparing the
Oh,
two films. I'm saying that Mike Lee's Heavy is. I mean, like Mike Lee's Naked is a heavy film, right? And I don't. And I have
can I jump in
I have
though?
no issue with
Okay, you jump
anything
in
that
and
film
then
does.
Yeah,
yeah, then
because
I have some things
I
to
want to say
say.
this. This is the difference between, and I didn't see Mike Lee's naked.
Oh.
But I'm going to say this.
I
I
want to be
think
very
I
clear
want to
though, like I
wager.
am not knocking
Yes,
that
I know
film.
you're not. I know you're
Okay.
not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nobody thinks you are. Nobody.
Yeah.
I polled the room and I polled the audience. Nobody thinks you are. Um, so with after watching RoboCop, because I have a lot of thoughts and we went into a lot of different directions, but over the last 2 weeks, Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me has been singing in my head. Like Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me. I've even like said it out loud at like a grocery store, just like with my kids, like, oh, come on, we got to go. Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me. Like I just, because it just is such a cool line. It
Oh
just
my
rolls off.
God.
And I was just thinking this while we were talking. There's a famous Pearl. I'm a big Pearl Jam fan, and there's a famous story about the song "Better Man," which Eddie Vedder wrote when he was a kid, and then like recorded. The band recorded it like with that was going to be on their second album, and uh, the producer, when he heard like a demo version of Better Man, was like, "Wow, that's a hit." And Eddie Vedder was like, "Nope, we're pulling it off the second album," because he didn't want a hit because like they just the way the band was and like the momentum they had at the moment, he wanted to pull that. He was like, "I don't want this type of commercial success." And I think the difference between a movie like Naked and uh the difference between that and RoboCop is when you have a line like "Dead or Alive, You're Coming With Me," it's so catchy, it's so cool that it really speaks to the more dangerous natures of the film, and that is like what you're left with, the cool catchphrase, instead of like the heaviness of and the realities of violence. Where I think with a movie like Naked, you're like forced to
Yes.
just sit with the discomfort of it.
Yes.
Yes, you said it better than I could have. That is sort of the difference between
Yes.
it's like the takeaway for people. And I know we've had this conversation, Michael, like about like what the danger of a movie where people could misconstrue things and that like I have a problem or sometimes I don't remember where you stand on it, but I think that's like the fear I have with certain movies where people like us might see certain themes or comments of danger in a film, and other people might just see it as being like this vigilante or like violence is cool or that guy, like something about it, like they're taking the wrong stuff out of it. And that really scares me. And I do think that's like the difference between, yeah, Naked is an incredibly like heavy, it like hits you over the head. It's like unrelenting, I would say, more than heavy in terms of the thematic elements, but it's not, there's never a payoff. Like at the end, you're not like that guy was cool. You're like that guy is a sick rapist and I thought he was cool for like half a minute because he's super smart, but like ultimately this person is dangerous. And I think that that is the difference between that film and like this film. It's just like, okay, there's a lot of violence. There's clearly themes about capitalism and corporate greed and all that, and like the dangers of technology and different things that are interesting. But ultimately, like, what is the normal person going to come away from this movie with? And that is like, oh, that he's like turns around and he's like, I'm Murphy, I'm cool, and like here we are in this world. I mean, there's nothing wrong with him, so I don't have a problem with the ending like in that way, but I guess just generally this idea that like a violent culture is somehow acceptable and that we're not disturbed by the movie we just saw. Like we're not like shivering. Like at the end of Naked, you're like shivering. You're just like, oh my God, like I can't. People are awful. I didn't feel that when I ended this movie.
I mean, I do, right? I guess that, right, this movie, right, tries to, right, have your cake and eat it too, right? In that, right, this movie, people are supposed to watch this movie with a bucket of popcorn, right? That is what this film is supposed to do, right?
Right.
And we're hoping it's like, well, maybe they can be disturbed as well. There's no popcorn with Mike Lee's Naked, right? When Art House has got that film, I'm pretty sure they were like, oh, we're not selling much popcorn on this one.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I remember watching it. Like I just was like, I didn't move watching that film,
Hmm.
right? I just didn't move. And there are many films like that. I remember when, like, for example, I went to go see, and again, people look, this happens with a film like Robocop, and it happens with films that aren't Robocop. Right? Two stories come to mind. High school, Huntington Cinema Arts Center on Long Island, packed house, Martin Luther King Day, Hoop Dreams. People laughed in the theater. And I remember thinking, why the fuck are you laughing? Right?
Hmm.
Like, fast forward, Room comes out. I am in the theater. I am at BAM in Brooklyn watching it. There's a couple of scenes where people are laughing in that film. I was irate. The poor concession people, I literally went up to after the film and said, I recommend a sign gets put on the door here as people enter. Do not laugh. We will expel you if you do. the poor kids. I am more bothered by that than the cheering. And I'm not, and this is just me personally, right? Because I think both are issues. And then the cheering of Clarence Bonniger's fake blood spewing all over Robocop's chest after he guts him in the neck and standing up and putting my fist in the air.
Okay. So basically, you're saying you don't mind that kind of reaction. You're not concerned about it.
Not that I'm not concerned about it. Well, I guess my preference is this is a film, I would argue, this film is trying to make you feel. It is 100%
Mhm.
trying to make you feel. The music tries to make you feel, the movements try to make you feel. That whole scene where he goes back to the house and he's having memories, right? And the guy's like the guy on the camera, right? The and on the TV box, right, is saying like, make it your home, make me an offer, right? I forget what he says, but it triggers him, and he does that great scene where he's like, shoot, 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 and he punches, right? He's enraged and he doesn't know what to do, and he punches the TV. I feel in that moment, right? I
Yep.
think that is great physical acting. And the movie at the very, and if you don't, that's fine too. But the movie wants you to feel in that moment. And I,
Right.
I would take a film that is begging us to feel something, and then then a lot of films today where you're not really feeling anything, right? And the whole point is for you not to feel anything.
So what you're saying essentially is the film uh essentially is Manchester by the Sea, where they're saying like if you're they just it's important to feel something as long as the male characters in the film are feeling rage. Because that's the
No,
only time Murphy's incapable of any emotion once he becomes actually even
It's
before like
true. Right.
That
It's
no,
except
that's
not,
for
not true.
yeah.
That
if
scene
we go if we
at
go
night.
back to
No,
the
no, no,
audio,
no, no, no,
if
no.
we
He's
go
not
if we go
incapable
back
of
to
feeling
I want
any
him to go
emotion.
back and play the tape. Play the tape back, Eugene.
Oh
Michael
my
Michael has
God.
referenced the only time that feels anything, and it's rage. Um, and that's
I did not say that.
yeah, two different times.
And he does feel when when the night before the final showdown, where he's talking to and he's asking questions, right? I can feel them, but I don't remember them, right? That is sorrow. That is loss, right? He
That's a
there is
robot talking, though. I mean,
what
that's the thing is he's a robot. I mean,
well,
he's
but he's but
brain
he's but
dead
he's a
and it's a
person.
machine that's
It's
saying,
his soul
But
saying it. I
he's not
can feel
emoting.
them. That's hey, that's what's happened. That's what
But he's not
if
emoting
I don't
though.
know,
he's not
He's not
right, but he's not emoting because he's unable to emote. But there is
unless it's
remorse
rage.
in his no,
because
there
he's
is
only
remorse in his voice.
programmed for those few things he's supposed to do. So, yeah, like when you talked about feeling things going through that flashback scene or whatever, when he's going back to the suburbs and looking at his house and you're seeing the memories, like I think the problem I have with I don't want to say films like these, but I kind of feel that way. It like or scenes like those in films is that I can tell they want me to feel something. They're telling
Yeah,
me you should be feeling sad. You should be feeling what he's feeling. And I don't. I don't feel anything because it's so telegraphed. And so unless I respond more to subtle things where the film isn't telling me what to do, but I just feel it because I really care about the character. And I didn't really care about any of the characters in this because I didn't feel like they were that well developed. Like he's in one scene and then he dies. And like, yeah, he seems like an okay dude, but what really do I know about this person? So it's hard for me then to care about anything else because I just feel like the whole film is telling me what I should be feeling at every moment, and I'm just like, I don't really. I feel detached from the movie.
And I just want to say, like, I felt like Michael, like you, I was saying before, I felt for him, especially when he goes back to his home. And what the video real estate agent is saying is, or the guy thinking about buying the house, he's like, "Oh, I'd buy the house if these dusty old photographs weren't there." Some to that effect. He makes a comment about the pictures and trash, like calling them trash, and then he punches the screen. But the point about emoting, it's just very interesting because he's a robot trained to not commit crimes, only to enforce police protocol. Yet he commits like criminal mischief when he busts. He doesn't own that house, and he punches the screen like that's somebody else's property. So his that's what I was saying. Like he's emoting
he's
in a way that
investigating a murder. He's
yeah, but
investigating his own murder.
he's Yeah, what I'm saying is he's capable. What they're showing is like it's okay to demonstrate emotions and and practice autonomy, right, for this robot, so long as it's aggressive and violent. He's not like visiting his house and then going to the local pond and feeding the ducks or painting a, watercolor or something like that. He's like, oh, I feel horrible, so I'm going to punch this screen and commit destruction.
Which, first of all,
And
one
we're okay with it.
he's investigating crime and he still owns the home. At least his
He
right his
doesn't.
the real if it is the home has yet to be sold, meaning the Murphy family owns it.
Okay. I mean, I know that only one of us here is a licensed real estate
According to
broker,
the
and
narrative of the film,
yeah, but a
right,
dead
is
man
that
can't own property.
He's not technically dead. Well, yeah, he's a whatever he
right,
is.
He's
He's a
no, they
Murphy's
declare
dead.
him
Robocop.
dead, so now he's a property of the corporation. This is where we get. He's property of what's the Viatech or whatever. What is it? What's the
Omnicorp,
OP,
OCP.
whatever.
Omnicorp? Sorry. I just read something about Viatech purchasing deceased law enforcement. Um, So, but he definitely doesn't own that, and arguably is probably like the real estate company that owns that piece of technology to have people view the house virtually. But I'm just saying, like he is allowed. He's not allowed to. He can't shoot somebody without permission, but he's allowed to do other aggressive behaviors, is what the
Well,
movie's
he
saying.
actually can shoot people without permission. He can't shoot an OCP executive, right,
Yes, thank
without
you. That's
permission,
him.
but he can shoot
Hmm.
any
Right.
he can shoot. I mean, he's imbued, right, with he has to follow the law, but he can still he can shoot people, right? He's not asking
Yeah.
for
And
permission.
I do like that aspect, like that little, nugget of the film, that whatever the number four, the directive four that they have, because it speaks to the idea of corporations like creating something that could be dangerous, not even just like a robot or something like AI, but anything that could potentially cause them harm or be illegal. And then they're immune to whatever that is
Right.
ultimately. That the idea that they built that into the system, I think, is like a really smart. I mean, this is like before things got really bad, even. I mean, maybe things were bad then too, but like it's just become so much worse in that regard that it's interesting that they even we're touching on that then. But I feel like it's even more relevant now. Just the idea that like corporations or anyone in power, anyone with a lot of money, just is immune to any kind of legal ramifications of what they've done. And that he's like, yep, I set it up this way. We're good. Like, you can't attack me. I did like that. Yeah, I think that speaks to something.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I did on the upside, I did like seeing just like that 70s, 80s vibe cop. I miss that those guys in movies. Like I feel like there was something, before we started hating cops. Because maybe they used to be better.
Edit that out.
I mean, they were always corrupt, but I think like I kind of miss like the innocence of like where people were sort of or people believed like they were trying to do the right thing, and they're actually on the good side in this film. Like they're, the working class people, like the blue collar people, and they're being run by this corporation, and the way that he comes in and talks to them is so gross, and you actually like, are on their side. And I just kind of like miss the innocence of that, where you can like trust authority. Um, because now it's just everything's so cynical, and you don't trust anybody for any motive that they might have. And I feel like society at large like felt a certain way about them, like in a different way. It was sort of like nice to see that.
Yeah.
I agree. So Eugene, what did you think of the movie?
Uh, well, I missed the last 10 minutes, so I don't know.
No, not
Gosh.
again.
No, I just felt old. Because I don't know if it was like I don't do violence well anymore, but like that type of violence, it was just hard to watch, especially Murphy's assassination and just the amount of body parts being thrown around. It's very visceral. And I don't know if I was like 16 years old, if I would have been like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Like just being a boy and seeing violence. And now like, 20 years later, I'm just like, ugh, like this is really kind of distasteful to me.
When I first saw it, I didn't think it was awesome. Patrick referenced my friend Mike Martinez. He thought it was awesome, right? Like he thought, right, for me watching a movie like this for the first time, I mean even now, but even then, right? It was visceral. Like I felt it, right? I felt the violence and I found it horrifying. And then I also felt comforted by a protagonist who, for the most part, wasn't touched by it, right? In that, and then once he becomes, quote unquote, Robocop. Um, where the scenes where when the film transitions and the protagonist is, coated with armor, and he's protected, and now it's the time for him to for it not to be where maybe becomes more adventure, right? Than dystopian fear. It was still worrisome that that kind of violence can exist, even in those moments. But there was still comfort in those times. But I did have friends who were just like, yeah, this is so cool,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and that was whether it was Michael Martinez watching RoboCop, or I mean, even watching. I remember the first time I saw Full Metal Jacket. I saw it with a group of idiots, and it was eighth grade,
Oh my
and
God.
they were just like, "Oh, that was so cool! Watch this guy blow his head off."
Oh God.
Uh,
Yeah, see,
it's like,
that's
wow,
the
more like, and
danger I feel with
I
those
was, and I was
movies.
haunted, haunted by the film, and at the same time, of course, but those films aren't. Those people are idiots regardless. They're mean regardless, right? What like if you
Yeah.
like I mean, just like the bully in Stephen King's It. That guy wasn't watching Full Metal Jacket, and he was right, and he was a scary, violent, right, more of a threat, right, than Pennywise to those kids, right, until they meet Pennywise. So I go back and forth, right? I think that I find we're in more dangerous territory culturally now than we have been before, right? And right, this movie was what, almost 40 years ago now, right? 87, 97,
35 years
2007,
ago.
2000. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, almost, no, almost 40 years ago, right? 87, we're almost, yeah, almost 40 years ago.
Crazy to think it was that long ago. The
I
80s
know.
don't feel like that long, but yeah, I'm
Yeah.
considering my age, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard to know what to place blame, whether to place blame on a filmmaker. It's not their job to police how people are going to respond to things. I think it's just hard to know. That's why the tone, I think, is so important with like violent films, because if it's sort of cavalier, it almost gives permission to the audience to think it's okay. Whereas if it's making it seem really scary or really dark or really unpleasant, then it's harder to take as an audience member. I think like the harder it is to take, the better it is. The more like, I don't know, it's just responsible.
It's interesting that and this movie, like we're talking about our experience with this movie as children. And this movie
Hmm.
was a hard R. Like this movie there was a rated X version of it.
Really.
And from what I heard, the rated X version, Michael, I know you know more about this, but from what I heard, the rated X version isn't much different than the final cut. It's just a couple of edits down on like the executions. Like,
Hmm.
Murphy's execution was like edited down like a little slightly by like seconds and frames. So like to see like this movie wasn't made for kids, but kids found their way to this movie. And I think
Hmm.
that goes back to other cultural aspects of when it came out, which is like, you know, HBO, like the birth of like HBO and cable and I don't know, people sneaking into the movies, but that was probably always a thing. But because that movie was like people were recording that movie, like, taping it off of like the black box, cable box or whatever, and then like passing it around, right? I mean, I feel like I saw it. I feel like my memory of RoboCop is watching it in somebody's basement, even though I referenced Michael Martinez's house, which was the living room, which I
We
thought
got to get
I
Mike
thought adults.
Martinez in here to
I
really
know.
give his side of the story.
No, I mean, and he wasn't like he's not the villain. I mean, obviously he was like it was just playing in his house, and
Hmm.
we were all there. I mean, it wasn't. It was on loop. It was
There were many things we were not allowed to watch, right?
yeah.
And he was one of our friends who could watch anything, right? And he was also trusted Other friends who could watch anything weren't necessarily trusted, right? But we definitely would trust his opinion, precisely because, right, some of
As a
our friends,
10-year-old.
some of our friends, and also some of our friends had a bit of a cruel streak in them, and he didn't have one, right? Which is what made his opinion trusted as well. Um, so I mean, I know I'm bouncing, we're bouncing all over the place here, but look at something like Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, right? You don't see much of any of the violence that the Joker enacts, right? That scene where, like, he puts a pencil through the guy's head. People could say
Wait,
like that they saw that happen, and it doesn't happen. They felt the violence, right? And that was enough, right, for people.
Sure. But I would argue that that is was the point. Like whether they did something distorted with it or not, that's what people are going to do. But if you don't show it, like it's the danger, like that movie is really creepy. Like that, like obviously Heath Ledger did something incredible with that character and he's really menacing and they're really speaking to something like evil there. And not showing it is a choice. And that's even more proof to my point that if you don't show it, it can be even scarier. You don't have to show it. And then when you do show it over and over, people get sort of inured to that. And then they stop feeling things. They start cheering, they laugh. It's like we start thinking it's cool. Like, oh, that guy's head gets blown off. Well, if it was your mom, you wouldn't be saying that. So I don't know. I just feel like if we know we don't have to show it for us to feel something, then why do we have to do it? Why do we have to show it in that way, especially that they did in this film? Because it was a little crazy. I mean, it didn't need to be like that. What is the point of that? I guess I'll ask you, like, what do you think is the point of that in this film? Like, why did it have to be that way? Or did you feel like you benefited from seeing it like that?
Yeah, so the ultra violence is not outside of the villain, the villains getting theirs at the end. I don't. The violence is not what makes me love the film, right? I think Wim Verhoeven, my understanding is he grew up in a very violent context, right? It's the director's film, right? I think, did he grow up in The Hague, right? Like he grew up, right, in a post Second World War, right, incredibly violent environment, and his films are violent likely because of those experiences, or his earlier films are violent likely due to those experiences. So maybe he's working something out, or maybe that's just a preference, or maybe he wants to show folks, right? And that is what he believes he's doing, right? Is showing folks just how brutal violence can be. And maybe that works, maybe it doesn't, right? He's doing these like major Hollywood films where, I mean, I think that people find, right, like we're jumping to Total Recall. I know people find that film where he shoots Sharon Stone in the head very disturbing. It's not like you see violence that you don't see her head explode, but it is very disturbing, right? So like he's able to either show it and make it seem gross and or schlocky, and people think that it's unrealistic and therefore funny, or this other thing. Um, any final thoughts?
I didn't hate it. I mean, I enjoyed parts of it. I guess I'm glad I saw it.
I have a question for you. I watched recently. Have you ever seen The Cell?
Oh,
Jennifer
is that what I
Lopez,
was gonna say?
2000.
I know of it. I don't know that I've ever seen it.
I saw it in the movie theater and I watched it recently, and I watched it the other night again, actually, only since 2000, and it still held up for me. But anyway,
Okay, I was
Patrick.
going to say because I remember you saying that movie collectively people have a real issue with, but I remember
Yeah,
you
I love it.
liking it. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
No, no, no.
Huh.
It got panned. Roger Ebert liked it at the time. I remember that, and he's always good
Okay.
people, even if I disagree with them. But yeah, no, he was one of the few who liked it at the time and stuck up for it. It was pretty innovative. That director is super cool.
Okay. Who is
Um,
it?
and forgetting his name, like Tarsem is his last name, I think. He
Hmm.
did that movie The Fall, I think, right? Was that it? He just incredibly visual. And anyway,
Okay.
I really dug it.
Okay.
We all had the flu this week, so I was home watching a
No,
lot of movies, and that
sorry.
was one that I really enjoyed.
Oh, what else did you watch? Did you watch anything that was
Oh yeah, I caught up on a lot of things. I know we like probably don't have that much time to talk, but I saw The Brutalist.
Oh,
Hmm.
I don't
yeah.
even know. I really don't even know what to say. I have a lot of thoughts, and I ended up just because I saw it alone. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't know anyone else who had seen it. And so I finally found someone who yesterday who had seen it, and we talked briefly about it, and I kind of like was able to process my own thoughts. But I'm curious what you think. Like, do you want to just go for it and then
Sure,
I can,
I'll go for it.
because I'm a little bit still like, yeah.
Going into the film, I thought it was going to be how I felt watching the second half, the whole movie. But the first half surprised me and I loved it. Outside of the part in the beginning, look, they're in like the brothel and I'm watching it in IMAX, right? And I'm like, why do I need to see Adrien Brody's penis? Right? Like, why do I need to see it? One, if you want to keep me in the film, if I'm seeing Adrien Brody's penis, right? I'm not being kept in the film because I'm saying, hey, there's Adrien Brody's penis, right? So
Well, I
I
didn't even notice Adrien Brody's penis. So now I feel like I have to go back and watch it. Well, I
like
watched it at home,
well,
so
they
I didn't
don't
even
like
see it.
overtly show it. They show it. Eugene saw it with me, right? Eugene, like you see his penis, right? Especially in IMAX, right? Like they show like a little bit of it, right? And they keep showing a little bit of it, and that's the annoying part because it's like keeps like popping up, and you're like cut it, just cut it a
Oh.
little bit, right? You're cutting it intentionally, so you're doing this, like you're playing this game. So
Mm.
why?
Wow,
Like
you're really mad about this.
Well,
well,
also
because
the
it's
language
taken.
he's using right now. Can we just
Oh
recognize
my God.
Michael's like really catering to like the juvenile crowd? He's like Adrian Brody's like, I don't even want to be here if it's not going to be Adrian Brody's penis. Like, why did I even show up if it's not for Adrian
Yeah,
Brody's
he was like, you better
penis?
show it.
Yeah, you better show it. And
So
and
so
but it
that
keeps popping
so
up, and they should just cut it out.
Oh my God.
the first half of the film,
Oh.
I really did. I after that, like I loved it. I thought it was really fantastic. I thought it looked amazing. The acting was exceptional. I was really invested. And in the second half of the film, it annoyed me. It just did. That scene in the first half where he's on the bread line, with that
Hmm.
fantastic actor and his son. I
Yeah.
love that scene. And they
Hmm.
keep bringing that guy back, and I'm like, and then in the second half of the film, I'm thinking to myself, consistently thinking to myself, what is the purpose of this relationship? I hope that I like that it's a consistent relationship and they really can do something with it. But then he just dismisses that guy, and that's the end of it. And it makes me think like, so was he just here in the beginning to show that this guy's a cool dude, that Brody's protagonist is cool because he did this thing, right? And he's bringing this person on with him. So like that annoyed me.
Hmm.
And it's like the second half, unfortunately, just I found to be really frustrating, in many ways. And I'm even more frustrated by this, just like this absolute idea that this is the very definition of the highest art. I'm not saying it's not that, but for like throughout this like award cycle, right? This large conversation about this being the peak of art, I find to be frustrating and irritating and annoying. That's not the film's fault, right? But the filmmaker is also talking about it as such, right? Like
Right.
in interviews, right? That it's just like,
Yeah, it's a little self-congratulatory at this point. Yeah, I felt similarly. I mean, I think that's probably why I'm still processing it, is because I am still trying to find the thing I thought I was going to get out of it. Like I went in thinking like I'm going to be obsessed with this movie. This is going to be my favorite movie of the year. It's going to be incredible. I'm ready for it. And then I was like, what is this? And then it ended and I was like, what? What is this? And I'm still kind of thinking that, and I didn't love it. Like I think it has problems. Doesn't feel like a full like movie, and I can take things out of it. Like I'm sort of trying to pull things out of it. I'm like, maybe this means this, maybe this means this. But ultimately, like I don't, yeah, I think it was kind of messy. It didn't come together for me at all. Yeah, and yeah, the fact that it's like maybe people want it to be the highest form of art, or because it's shot so beautifully, or because it has this interesting, it's like this epic kind of thing with an intermission. It like it's all, the style was incredible. Like I
yep,
loved the credits. I was like, this is an incredible concept,
yep,
you know, but that's not enough to make a movie. And there's so much potential there. Like I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a commentary on like the post-Holocaust sort of trauma, which I guess it is. I guess that sort of is the point of why he's the way he is. Like he is pretty brutal, for lack of a, whatever. Obviously, that's the point. But I don't know. Yeah, I just like I kept trying to read into it. Like I was talking to this person yesterday about it, and I was like, okay, like so the Guy Pearce character, did he like go kill himself at the end? Is this supposed to be like a
that's what
Hitler
people say,
reference?
right? It's supposed
Like
to,
that
right?
Hitler
Yeah,
killed himself in the bunker and this is like something? Or then it's like I was Yeah, like I think that the thing that made me feel like the film was trying to say something was when at the end when he goes to Venice, he talks about the making of I guess that structure he was trying to create when he talks about that the reason why he was so invested in those measurements was because he was trying to like recreate the concentration camp measurements. And I was like, okay, well now we're getting somewhere. Like the last hour of the last like minute of this movie that it was like, oh, this was the whole thing. It's like he's trying to basically force his experience onto like everyone else. It's like, well, this is what I had to live with, and now these people that are like not Jewish or going to, church or whatever this was going to be, that they're like now having to be faced with something almost like this weird underbelly, like he was doing this in like a surreptitious way. I really liked that, but then it didn't go anywhere. Like that didn't go anywhere. And I don't know if I was just reading into that or that's just what I wanted to take away from it. But I don't know.
No, I mean I like that reading of it. And hopefully that is what's there. I just found, I mean, call me simple. But the a complete unknown, like I just thought that ruled.
I did see that too. And I was kind of like, on that too. I liked it, but I didn't love it.
Well, I wouldn't ex I yeah, it's not that if you said I loved it, I was floored by it, then I would be like, oh wow, Leah really. I just it look, it's Hollywood, it's Hollywood
Hmm.
filmmaking. It's like basically they had all these resources and they used all of them and they used them
Hmm.
very well. It was the top of it was just the top of craft, period,
Hmm.
in every aspect. And if you're going to tell that story, that is the I would that is the very that is the specific way I would want that story told in every way that they told it. And that I find that to be very high, like high praise. That is not easy to do. And there were a number of things that they pull off very, very well.
So what else did you catch up on?
Wait, can I just talk about the Brutalist for one more second? Because I have a
Yeah.
Yeah.
question for you. Because so the whole movie, because I'm just thinking about these things. Like when the film opens with the niece,
Hmm.
I thought there was going to be some weird thing going on with her the whole movie. Like I thought maybe he had abused her or something. I don't know. They'd had like a weird vibe. And then I didn't really understand how it opened. And then when it ended and it went back to her, I don't know. I thought like, did I miss something? I almost wanted to watch the movie again. Did you pick up on any of that, or how did you interpret that?
I mean, for me, it was just as simple as right, the trauma of the whole experience, right? She has no voice, and then she gets it back by one immigrating right to her homeland, and from being there and from his experiences, like really like built like as he's building right these things, she's building her voice. That was, I mean, that
Okay.
was I don't I didn't see I didn't make any connection that he was in any way violent to her.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah, that may have been
he
of
was
me
very
misreading it.
concerned, right, about her well-being,
Hmm.
right, particularly with the family. Didn't want right them anywhere near her once he realized like who they were. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I also saw Anora, which is, have you seen Anora?
No, I'm dying to see Anora.
So this is like what I think might be my favorite. Like, so I saw that I saw like the brutal like all these films like all in
Hmm.
one week. I was just like I gotta get these down. So I feel like I was like just sort of comparing them all. I really liked Anora, like way more than I thought I was going to, and I'm sort of shocked that I liked it better than The Brutalist.
And
I
Baker
don't know.
rules, right? I mean,
Yeah,
just
he's really an incredible filmmaker. Did you ever see the Florida Project? Did I get that for
it's
you?
on
Oh
my
my God,
list. No,
it's
I have
so
it. I know.
good. It's
I know.
such an incredible
I
movie.
know. I need
All right, I'm
to
gonna
have
send
a
that to you. I'm gonna send that
I
to you,
have it.
and you're
I
gonna
have it.
see.
I
Oh,
have it.
did I? I may have sent it to you. I may have actually bought it for you at
That you
some
know what?
point.
That may be one of the few. But I usually watch everything you send, but maybe I didn't watch that one. But
Yeah, well,
um
it's really good. I didn't love the last film as much. Red Rocket, it was kind of
I
eh
haven't
to
seen that
me.
one either. No, I need to catch up. There's a couple of Criterion's doing a couple of his early stuff too. I'm looking forward to like going all in on Baker, but I'm trying to find it's playing in a couple of theaters, but only
Hmm.
at like one showing a day. And
Okay,
I really want to try to find the time to see it. It just won the PGA, I believe,
did it? Okay,
last night. So it's getting back up there.
okay.
And I'm very curious how it'll do at the Oscars. But
Okay.
I'm very excited
Yeah.
to
Oh, with
see.
the was it the Critics' Choice Awards? I think it won Best Film at the Critics' Choice
Yeah,
Awards too,
maybe
which
that was
is
it.
was
Critics' Choice
interesting.
Awards. Yep,
Okay.
yep, yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was really well done. It was really interesting. Yeah. Isn't a perfect movie. Like there hasn't been a movie that I'm like, this is just perfection. Like I want this to win everything. But I really did like that. And then I also saw this foreign film called The Girl with the Needle. Have you heard about this movie?
No.
It's really bleak. It was like
Wow.
naked territory, but really good. And it's based on a true story. So after I saw it, I was like, this is too much for me. And then I was like, this better be true or else, you've done some damage. And it is true. But I would highly recommend seeing that. It's like all in black and white, like a Danish film.
Cool.
Really good. But yeah, I think those are my weekly viewings. What about you? Anything else?
I did The Cell. I watched Rio Bravo for the first time, and I had fun watching it.
Okay.
Howard Hawks,
Oh, okay.
John Wayne, Dean Martin, right? Like just I'm trying to think what else have I watched. I did watch a ton while I was sick. I watched Mike Figgis' Internal Affairs. I really
Hmm.
enjoyed the first hour. I hated the second hour. I hated it with a passion. It's Richard Gere and Anthony Garcia.
Hmm.
I think there was another recent Kino 4K release. Oh, I watched Sea of Love. I love Sea of Love. Al Pacino,
Okay.
um, Ellen Barkin, Richard Price screenplay, like shot in New York, like 1989. Like I just fantastic, amazing character actors: John Goodman, John Spencer, Michael
Hmm.
Rooker, Samuel L. Jackson early role, and I had a blast watching that. And there's a bunch of others, but I can't really think of them right now.
Hmm.
I haven't watched. My Conclave hasn't arrived yet. My Substance arrived. I'm
Oh,
excited for that. Um,
yeah.
so
We need to
I'm
talk
looking.
about Conclave. I
I'm
have some
excited to watch
thoughts.
both. Some people are like, "Oh, that movie was so intentionally funny." Like people said, you thought it was intentionally funny. So I'm very
That's
excited to
okay.
check it out.
I just watched like the first like 3 minutes because it was, I let it, I had Peacock on and it just started
Oh,
running.
we just started.
I was like, is this supposed to be funny?
Right.
So it's interesting. I was like, I feel like I could get into this. I need a good lighthearted comedy.
Oh, here's what I watched, and I wondered if you ever saw. Have you ever seen Sugarland Express?
Is that a documentary?
No, that's
Oh,
Spielberg's first proper
no, I've
film.
never seen that.
Goldie Hawn, Richard Atherton, right? Like
Okay.
it is
It's
basically
awesome.
Spielberg. It's half Spielberg, half him making like a 70s, like your typical like 70s, like Robert Altman. When you think of the 70s and you think of like Robert Altman, like it
Hmm.
is like half like that and half Spielberg.
Interesting. Okay. No, I've never seen it.
Based on a true story. You'd be in you if you had seen Express and not known who the director was, that would have been fascinating.
Yeah, I probably would. If you talked about it being like Robert Altman, I don't think I would have expected it to feel like Spielberg.
And that's
That's
what
like an
makes
interesting
it's
combination.
very I love Spielberg, but it's
Yes, I do.
so it's amazing. I had such a great time watching it. You like every time I watch that film when I start it, I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm really gonna dig it this time around,
Mhm.
and it gets me every time.
All
He's
right.
just
I'll
he's
add it
so
to my
good,
list for
and it's
seeing
pretty.
things.
Yeah. Yeah, I was curious about that. We should add that to the list. I'll have to send you Sugarland Express, then we can talk about it.
All right, you're making this list longer and longer. But sure.
All right.
Unwrapped Finally is hosted by Michael Lavalio, Leah Shell, and Patrick Lavalio. Produced by me, Eugene Mock. Thanks for listening. See you next time.